Top 10 Richest Men in History. Hello viewers, welcome to another exciting edition and thanks for watching. Today we shall be talking about top 10 richest men in history. There have been countless fortunes won and lost throughout history, both modern and ancient. People have built massive amounts of wealth a variety of ways, through blood, through the crown, savvy investing, or building incredibly powerful businesses. But throughout history, things are a bit more violent. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any of our amazing videos. Surely in a modern world where technology enables the creation and consolidation of truly incomprehensible wealth, we are living among the richest individuals in history. It turns out we are not. The world's wealthiest individuals lived in earlier times, in eras in which pure wealth was harder to measure. Here are the 10 richest men ever with available information. Number 10. Cornelius Vanderbilt, $185 billion. He was an American business magnate who built his wealth in railroads and shipping. After quitting school at 11, Cornelius Vanderbilt started a small ferry business, which resulted in him buying a steamboat and getting in with a very powerful businessman named Thomas Gibbons, who taught him on how to be smart in business. When Gibbons died, Vanderbilt stayed on with Gibbons' sons and then bought him out. Little by little, Vanderbilt gained control of the ferry lines around the city and made a secret monopoly by having an under-the-table partnership with a rival company. Since his ferry business grew around the time of the railroads, he became involved with the latter since railroad routes often relied on steamships. Vanderbilt worked his way into leadership positions in the inland water trade and invested in the rapidly growing railroad industry. Nicknamed the Commodore, he is known for owning the New York Central Railroad. According to his biographer, Stiles, he vastly improved and expanded the nation's transportation infrastructure, contributing to the transformation of the very geography of the United States. He embraced new technologies and new forms of business organization and used them to compete. He helped to create the corporate economy that would define the United States into the 21st century. He bought a ton of land in New York, and after the gold rush, Vanderbilt got into ocean liners, later taking the railroad business to the next level. He invested in a handful of railroad companies, including the New York and Harlem Railroad, and built Grand Central Terminal. Number 9. Henry Ford, $199 billion. Henry Ford was born on July 30, 1863, on his family farm in Wayne County near Dearborn, Michigan. When Ford was 13 years old, his father gifted him a pocket watch, which the young boy promptly took apart and reassembled. Friends and neighbors were impressed and requested that he fix their timepieces too. He was the founder of the Ford Motor Company and chief developer of the assembly line technique of mass production. By creating the first automobile that middle-class Americans could afford, he converted the automobile from an expensive curiosity into an accessible conveyance that profoundly impacted the landscape of the 20th century. As a Ford Motor Company owner, he became one of the richest and best-known people in the world. He is credited with Fordism, mass production of inexpensive goods coupled with high wages for workers. Ford had a global vision with consumerism as a key to peace. His intense commitment to systematically lowering costs resulted in many technical and business innovations, including a franchise system that put dealerships throughout North America and major cities on 6 continents. Ford left most of his vast wealth to the Ford Foundation and arranged for his family to permanently control it. Ford had an interest in Americana. In the 1920s, Ford began to work to turn Sudbury, Massachusetts into a themed historical village. He moved the schoolhouse supposedly referred to in the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb, from Sterling, Massachusetts, and purchased the historic Wayside Inn. This plan never saw fruition. Ford repeated the concept of collecting historic structures with the creation of the Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan. It may have inspired the creation of Old Sturbridge Village as well. About the same time, he began collecting materials for his museum, which had a theme of practical technology. It was opened in 1929 as the Edison Institute. Although greatly modernized, the museum continues today. Number 8. Muammar Gaddafi, $200 billion. Born in 1942 and was commonly known as Colonel Gaddafi, he was a Libyan revolutionary politician and political theorist. He governed Libya as a revolutionary chairman of the Libyan Arab Republic from 1969 to 1977, and then as a brotherly leader of the Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya from 1977 to 2011. He was initially ideologically committed to Arab nationalism and Arab socialism, but later ruled according to his own Third International theory. Born near Sirte, Italian Libya, to a poor Bedouin family, Gaddafi became an Arab nationalist while at school in Sabna, later enrolling in the Royal Military Academy, Benghazi. When the assets of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi and his kin were frozen in March 2011, some of the numbers that came out were astonishing. The US had seized $30 billion of the family's investments, Canada had frozen $2.4 billion, Austria had frozen $1.7 billion, and the UK had frozen $1 billion. It was reported that these figures were nowhere close to his actual wealth. According to senior Libyan officials, Gaddafi secretly put more than $200 billion in bank accounts, real estate and corporate investments around the world before he was killed. Number 7. William the Conqueror, $209 billion. William was the son of the unmarried Robert I, the Duke of Normandy, by his mistress Helena. His illegitimate status and his youth caused some difficulties for him after he succeeded his father, as did the anarchy which plagued the first years of his rule. During his childhood and adolescence, members of the Norman aristocracy battled each other, both for control of the child duke and for their own ends. In 1047, William was unable to quash a rebellion and began to establish his authority over the duchy, a process that was not complete until about 1060. When William first approached his men with the idea of invading England, he received a cool reception. He took the promise of land and title to persuade them otherwise. After the Battle of Hastings, William kept his promise and carved up much of England, rewarding those who had fought alongside with him the land at the expense of the native English aristocracy. One of the many Normans whose fortunes were transformed was William de Warenne. He chose Castle Archer Priory as the headquarters of his East Anglian landholdings. His marriage in the 1050s to Matilda of Flanders provided him with a powerful ally in the neighboring country of Flanders. By the time of his marriage, William was able to arrange the appointment of his supporters as bishops and abbots in the Norman church. His consolidation of power allowed him to expand his horizons, and he secured control of the neighboring county of Maine by 1062. Number 6. Jacob Fuga, $221 billion. He lived from 6th March 1459 to 30th December 1525. He was also known as Jacob Fuga the Rich, or sometimes Jacob II. He was a major German merchant, mining entrepreneur and banker. He was a descendant of the Fuga merchant family located in the free imperial city of Augsburg, where he was born and later also elevated through marriage to Grand Burger of Augsburg, German Großbürger zu Augsburg. Within a few decades, he expanded the family firm into a business operating in all of Europe. He began his education at the age of 14 in Venice, which also remained his main residence until 1487. At the same time, he was a cleric and held several prebendaries, even though he never lived in a monastery. Fuga is held to be one of the wealthiest individuals in modern history. The foundation of the family's wealth was created mainly by the textile trade with Italy. The company grew rapidly after the brothers Ulrich, George, and Jacob began banking transactions with the House of Habsburg as well as the Roman Curia, and at the same time began mining operations in Tyrol, and from 1493 on the extraction of silver and copper in the kingdoms of Bohemia and Hungary. As of 1525, they also had the right to mine quicksilver and kinaba in Almadeiri. Number 5. Mir Osman Ali Khan, $230 billion. He lived between the 6th of April 1886 and 24th of February 1967 and was the last Nizam or ruler of the princely state of Hyderabad, the largely princely state in the British India. He ascended the throne on 11th of August 1911 at the age of 25 and ruled the kingdom of Hyderabad between 1911 and 1948 until it was annexed by India. He was styled as His Exalted Highness HEH, the Nizam of Hyderabad. He was one of the wealthiest people of all time. The Nizam had 149 children. In 1937, he was featured on the cover of the Time magazine as the richest person at the time. He was the 5th richest man in history of mankind and the richest Indian who ever lived. On taking the throne, he studied and understood all the state's papers that his father sent to him. He was a benevolent ruler who patronized education, science, and development. During his 37-year rule, electricity was introduced, railways, roads, and airways were developed. He was known as architect of modern Hyderabad, and is credited with the establishment of numerous public institutions in the city of Hyderabad, including the Osmania University, Osmania General Hospital, State Bank of Hyderabad, Begumpet Airport, and Hyderabad High Court, to name a few. 2 reservoirs, namely Osman Sagar and Himayat Sagar, were built during his reign to prevent another great flood in the city. He was also a philanthropist, donating millions of rupees to various educational and religious institutions all over India. He also donated money towards the compilation of Holy Mahabharata. Apart from his wealth, he was known for his eccentricities, as he used to knit his own socks and borrow cigarettes from guests. Number 4. Nikolay Alexandrovich Romanov, $300 billion. He lived from the 18th of May 1868 to 17th July 1918 and was known in the Russian Orthodox Church as Saint Nicholas the Passion Bearer. He was the last emperor of all Russia, ruling from the 1st November 1894 until his forced abdication on 15th March 1917. During his reign, the Russian Empire implemented reforms which was the first civil liberties in Russian history. Literacy programs, state representations, modern infrastructures, and the beginning of major industrialization and military reforms after the defeat in the Russo-Japanese War 1904-1905. He was revered by Soviet historians, promoted by state propaganda as a weak and incompetent leader whose decisions led to military defeat and the death of millions of his subjects. As emperor, Nicholas gave support to the economic and political reforms promoted by top aides Sergei Witte and Pyotr Stofin, but strong aristocratic opposition prevented these from becoming fully effective. He supported modernization based on foreign loans and close ties with France, but restricted and resisted giving the new parliament major roles. He was criticized for his first perceived fault in the Kyodika tragedy, anti-Semitic progmos, Bloody Sunday, the violent suppressions of the 1905 Russian Revolution, the repression of political opponents, and his supposed responsibility for the defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, which saw the Russian Baltic Fleet annihilated at the Battle of Tsushima, together with the loss of Russian influence over Manchuria and Korea, and the Japanese annexation of the south of Sakhalin Island. During his reign, however, Russia experienced economic growth, and the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which had begun in 1891, was completed. The project remains one of the largest railways in the world. Number 3. Andrew Carnegie, $310 billion. He lived from November 25, 1835 to August 11, 1919. He was a Scottish-American industrialist and philanthropist. Carnegie led the expansion of the American steel industry in the late 19th century and became one of the richest Americans in history. He became a leading philanthropist in the United States and in the British Empire. During the last 18 years of his life, he gave away $350 million to charities, foundations, and universities. His 1889 article proclaiming the gospel of wealth called on the rich to use their wealth to improve society and stimulated a wave of philanthropy. Carnegie was born in Dunfermline, Scotland, and immigrated to the United States with his parents in 1848 at age 12. Carnegie started work as a telegrapher and by the 1860s had investment in railroads, railroad sleeping cars, bridges, and oil derricks. He accumulated further wealth as a bond salesman, raising money for American enterprises in Europe. He built Pittsburgh's Carnegie Steel Company, which he sold to J.P. Morgan in 1901 for $303,450,000. It became the U.S. Steel Corporation. Carnegie devoted the remainder of his life to large-scale philanthropy, with special emphasis on local libraries, world peace, education, and scientific research. With the fortune he made from business, he built Carnegie Hall in New York and the Peace Palace and founded the Carnegie Corporation of New York, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Carnegie Institution for Science, and Carnegie Trust for the Universities of Scotland, Carnegie Hero Fund, Carnegie Mellon University, and the Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh, among others. Number 2. John D. Rockefeller, $340 billion. John Davidson Rockefeller Sr. lived from July 8, 1839 to May 23, 1937. He was an American business magnate and philanthropist. Rockefeller was born into a large family in upstate New York that moved several times before eventually settling in Cleveland, Ohio. Rockefeller became an assistant bookkeeper at age 16 and went into several business partnerships beginning at age 20, concentrating his business on oil refining. Rockefeller founded the Standard Oil Company in 1870. He ran it until 1897 and remained its largest shareholder. Rockefeller's wealth soared as kerosene and gasoline grew in importance, and he became the richest person in the country, controlling 90% of all oil in the United States at its peak. Oil was used throughout the country as a light source until the introduction of electricity and as a fuel after the invention of the automobile. Rockefeller gained enormous influence over the railroad industry, which transported his oil around the country. Standard Oil was the first great business trust in the United States. Rockefeller revolutionized the petroleum industry and, through corporate and technological innovations, was instrumental in both widely disseminating and drastically reducing the production cost of oil. His company and business practices came under criticism, particularly in the writings of author Ida Tabel. The Rockefeller name is deeply ingrained in American history, and John D. Rockefeller's $340 billion fortune still stands today as nearly the largest the world has ever seen. Number 1. Mansa Musa, $400 billion. Musa I lived from 1280 to 1337. Mansa Musa was the 10th Mansa, which translates to Sultan, Conqueror, Emperor of the Mali Empire, an Islamic West African state. He has been described as the wealthiest individual of the Middle Ages. At the time of Musa's ascension to the throne, Mali in large part consisted of territory of the former Ghana Empire, which Mali had conquered. The Mali Empire consisted of land that is now part of Mauritania and the modern state of Mali. During his reign, Musa held many titles such as Emir of Mele, Lord of the Mines of Wangara, and Conqueror of Ganata. Musa conquered 24 cities along with their surrounding districts. During Musa's reign, Mali may have been the largest producer of gold in the world, and Musa has been considered one of the richest persons in history. He made his fortune by exploiting his country's salt and gold production. Many mosques he built as a young man still stands today. After Mansa Musa I's death in 1331, however, his heirs were unable to hang on to the fortune, and it was substantially depleted by civil wars and invading armies. Although money does not have a fixed value, there is a big gap between the richest people of all time and the current richest people in the world. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and turn on post notification.